Yeah, we are a Kimchi family. We're highlighting Korean Americans, Koreans in the sports industry, and we would just want to learn about their journeys and what went into getting them to where they are and what they've done. So I hope you guys appreciate this talk. This is going to be recorded as well and uploaded on YouTube. And little bit about Marshall. Marshall will be moderating us again. I'm sure you guys have known he's the Lake Oswego High School basketball coach, head coach at Lake Oswego in the Portland area. And we, of course, have Steve Baik on. And, I met Steve and I met Marshall earlier this year, actually, trying to get Kimchi Express rolling. I don't know if touched on it last week a little bit, but the basketball tournament TBT is a big passion of mine. And I've got a team out there called the Kimchi Express. And hopefully we can run it back next year with a great Korean coaching staff and a Korean team.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll get that going. But without further ado, I'll pass it over to Marshall, and then we can get this started.
All right. Thanks for that, Daniel. Good to see everybody. This is week 2, even though our last talk with Jonathan Yim of the Portland Trailblazers was two weeks ago. Can't believe how fast it's going. But today we have Steve Baik. I don't even know where to start with your resume, Steve. And I want to talk you up, but Steve was a 2016 National Coach of the Year, Naismith USA Today National Coach of the Year, coach at Chino Hills High School program that went on to win the mythical national championship with a record of 35-0. He had been coaching actually a long time at Chino Hills, until he was able to accomplish that feat. After that, he went on to Fairfax High School in LA, a powerhouse program, did an amazing job there, won the city championship, and has moved on and has some other ventures that he's working on today. And I wanted to, again, for Steve, a good friend of mine, much of this is, I hope it's an encouragement to you guys, but, for us, the two of us in the high school coaching profession, oftentimes, just being one of the few Korean Americans out there, it's been a lonely journey at times. And for myself, as I'm going on in my career, to have another brother who's really had a similar path, a lot of the challenges that we connect on, it's been an encouraging thing. And whether you're a Korean or Japanese or anybody else who's joining in, we think about this space a little bit as like, if we were to, again, getting out of this COVID time, if we can get into we could all go out to a Korean barbecue down in LA. And those of you, I see you, Coach Teo in Portland over there, give a shout out to you. I don't know if you've had a chance to go out to a Korean barbecue here out in Portland, but that's kind of the feel that we want to welcome you into this space. And as we branch out, just even, more into a diverse array of audience and of guests, we hope that there's a common theme that comes up of acceptance, of mentorship, of caring about the game and caring about each other. So hopefully a little bit of that will come out today. I know Steve has a special guest that he just couldn't wait to share with the rest of you as well today. But real quickly, that's enough of that. I'm gonna just turn it over to Steve. I'll just, wave to you, just Steve, what's up, brother? And just kind of let you take it away. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you were born and raised, and just your childhood and upbringing first.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. Well, thank you all for coming on to this Zoom call, and really appreciate, Kimchi Express, Daniel, Marshall, inviting me to be the guest speaker here. And just a little bit about myself. I was actually born in Korea, and when I was a year and a half, we immigrated over to the U.S., to Southern California, and grew up, we started off in downtown LA, and my dad got a job, in East LA and around the Monterey Park area. So grew up there. And we kind of traveled a bit from there to the Valley. We lived in Van Nuys for a couple of years, moved back to the San Gabriel Valley. And just during that time, it was just trying to entertain ourselves, outside of our apartment. And I remember the time that, I was about 6 or 7 years old, and my dad took me to Costco, and my sister wanted a Cabbage Patch doll, and we weren't well off, and it was one or the other. And I didn't really ask for the basketball, but I just knew that my sister wanted that Cabbage Patch doll really bad, and I think my dad just made the decision for us and picked the basketball. And it was since that moment that my basketball journey, literally began. I took that basketball, walked it across the street to our neighborhood, school, and it was just hours and hours of playing and falling in love with the game. And from that point, I never really played organized basketball until I was in 8th grade. So we moved to a town called Temple City, and I got to go to Arcadia School, and so that was my first experience of organized basketball. They had me playing the post, and I just mastered it. Whatever the coach told me to do, I just did it. I was unbelievable in the post. I got comments such as, that move reminded me of Kevin McHale. And so, I just did what I was told, and I did the best I could, and I just remember hours and hours at, the park across the street, just mastering the moves over and over again by myself. And I feel like those were, things that really, made me a better coach, in just appreciating the different aspects of a coach in the game. And so even though I was a point guard, really got to appreciate, the post play as well. And, from there I played at Arcadia High School, earned a scholarship to Westmont College in Santa Barbara. And, that experience allowed me to learn a lot about the game of basketball, allowed me to meet people like Coach Yanai, who's, on the call here, who's one of my mentors and one of my biggest influences as a coach, and, just as a person. Just can't, at some point I've been talking to Marshall and Daniel about, I feel bad because this call should really be about, Coach Yanai, and there should be a series about Coach Yanai, because he's the real pioneer of, Asian American basketball. And not just Asian American. I mean, he just happens to be Asian American, and has had just unbelievable success in the game. And he's done it from just the motivation of just, excellence and just wanting to teach. And so, he's been an unbelievable mentor to me. And I just can't thank Coach enough for what he's meant in my life, and just honored to have him on this call. But that experience at Westmont allowed me to meet Coach Yanai. And I know I'm kind of, talking a little too much right now, but I just want to share this story about my first experience. My first time meeting Coach Yanai was, Coach Yanai was at Cal State LA, and we were getting set to play them for the first time my freshman year. And we were in the locker room, and my coach, instead of reviewing the game plan, he was talking about our opponent's coach, how you mentioned that he was a Japanese American coach. So that caught my attention, being an Asian American. And he just started talking about how much respect he had for Coach Yanai, and how much, he's meant to the game, and how, he's achieved so much with so little. And, so that really caught my attention. And so I didn't know anything about the coach, and I was kind of curious to see why my coach, instead of going over the game plan, was talking about the opponent's coach. And so that moment always stuck with me, and that moment allowed me to just, follow Coach Yanai, and, got to meet him years later. And so, from there, started my coaching career, and just started to, really seek out a mentorship from Coach Yanai. And, it's been an unbelievable journey of coaching for about 18, 19 years. And I'll tell you, I couldn't have dreamt of achieving some of these, amazing things that, that I was fortunate enough to be a part of. And so I guess that's why we're here, on this call.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Steve. Again, I was intentional about kind of leaving it out. Again, so many people recognize you from the fact that you had the height of your success with the national championship, coaching the Ball brothers. I'm sure that's why a lot of people are tuning in. But just, we wanted to unpack the origin story, right? How you got into it, how you found the game. So you shared a little bit about playing in your freshman year. After that game, you continue on, you finish your career at Westmont. What came after that from graduation onto the next step?
Yeah, I, really had a goal to play professionally. This basketball journey of mine was a journey that I had to go about myself in against the wishes of my parents, against the, what culture was telling me, that because I was an Asian American, that basketball was something that I found myself, questioned often on the basketball courts by, other, people that, wondered what I was doing on the basketball court. And, as a player, as a coach, I've had to advocate for myself. And, I again, just growing it up in those times, it's just that your parents want what's best for you, and they want what's best for you with what they know. And what they know is, very limited, as far as coming to a whole new country and just, they just want the best for you at that time. Sports wasn't something, where Asian Americans, succeeded in. And so, but I just had a passion for it. I just had a natural, passion for sports. And I just had something else in me that, you couldn't tell me I couldn't do anything. If you told me I couldn't do something, I was going to do it. And so, you can call that competitive fire. You can call that whatever you want. But I just had this passion in me that I was going to do what I wanted to do, as far as achieving, certain things. And so, in that basketball world, it was against, just constantly fighting against challenges that most people don't. And looking back, I could look back and say, what, why was that me? But, that just put fuel to my fire. And I feel like it made me a better coach, that I had to really be better. I had to be that much more prepared, instead of winning a game by 1 or 2 and just winning, we're going to need to win by 10, 20 points, And so, I look back and I embrace the challenges that I've had to go through. And, along this journey, I'm maybe getting ahead of myself, but, Marshall and I have come to a position where I think, Coach Yanai has inspired me to, really embrace is, really about the next generation of coaches and people, and being advocates for them. And so I've taken a step back from coaching and, really wanted to pour into my family, and then also seeing if, we can really do something with this platform and just really encouraging Asian Americans and all minorities that were dealt with a challenge or, a restriction or discrimination. And so, just to be advocates there. And this basketball platform has allowed us to do that,
Yeah. I think a lot about, so, when I'm hearing you, just to fill in the blanks a little bit, I know that you try to go play professionally in Korea, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So that was a chapter in your life. You come back, and now, again, you touch on a little bit, your parents are like, hey, go pick a more stable,
Mm-hmm.
profession. But here you are. So your first high school coaching job, where was it? At any point, is this where you find some encouragement from Coach Yanai, or How did that come about?
Yeah, so I always knew I wanted to get back into teaching and coaching. I was invited to coach at my high school. When I was in high school, as a high school player, I was invited to participate in some youth basketball camps, and just fell in love with teaching and helping the youth there. And so I knew that was something that I wanted to do, after my playing days. And so I was very disappointed for, not being given the opportunity to play, professionally in Korea because of, the lack of, they didn't allow dual citizenships at the time. And, I got so close. I got invited to a training camp by a professional team in Korea, played really well, became friends with, a lot of the players, and, the coaches and the general manager, verbally told me that they wanted to draft me, but because of the rules there, I couldn't play as a Korean. And so I would have to be an import player, because I had my U.S. citizenship. So anyways, realizing that that door wasn't going to open up for me, I went back home, and I got a call from a college buddy of mine to move up to Northern California. And we got invited to coach at a brand new public school called Hercules High School in the Bay Area. And so I did that for a year, and I realized that I needed to come back home and get my teaching credential. So at that point, my high school coach was coaching at John Muir High School in Pasadena, where, John Muir had some legendary basketball players and athletes. That was actually Jackie Robinson's high school. And Stacey Ogman, Jock Vaughn were certain players that came out of, John Muir. And they were a school that was in my high school league. So I knew of them. I had friends that were on the team, and I loved the school. I actually fell in love with John Muir, and I taught special ed there. Without my teaching credential, the only position that was open was special ed. And so I walked into my first day of teaching class, and, I just, I see a bunch of tough-nosed kids, and one kid stands up and says, this was the third month into the school year, and says, "We're going to run you out of this school just like we did the other two teachers." And I said, "Okay, we'll see about that," And so that was a journey itself. And, just that was my toughest year of teaching. But it was a year that ended just unbelievably, just got to know some of these kids personally. And even though Pasadena is not an inner city school or inner city type of place, it's a very wealthy place, but this corner of Pasadena is, there's a lot of poverty and, a lot of gang activity. And so that's where all the John Muir students go to. But I fell in love with that school, and I fell in love with the players there. And I thought I was going to be there for the rest of my teaching and coaching, career. But the following year, I get a call from my former high school principal that happened to be at Arcadia. And he finds out that I'm back in town and basically offers me the varsity position as a 22-year-old kid. And so, of course, I have to take it, and took on that challenge. And, if any of you know what teaching special ed is like, that's like 2 or 3 jobs in itself. And to be able to, run a whole program, I literally burnt myself out, and just realized that I needed to either switch subjects or not coach. And at that point, my high school coach moved from John Muir to Chino Hills High School and invited me to come and assist him. And so I just realized this is the break I needed. But it ended up being a lot more than I expected, So that was the start of my Chino Hills career there.
Wow.
Yeah.
So now you had the Arcadia option, but then you went on to Chino Hills.
Well, I was the coach there for 3 or 4 years.
At Arcadia.
I was at Arcadia for 3 or 4 years. Yeah.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah.
How were you guys at those 3 or 4 years?
We were
How bit of a coach
actually,
were you?
you
Yeah.
know, I thought we did a really good job. I thought we won some games. We actually beat Los Osos, Calvin.
Hey,
You know,
sorry,
at
buddy.
Los Osos was actually, you know, Calvin will tell you, they were actually loaded with talent. You know, Division I player after Division I player, and you know, we happened to knock off that team in a tournament, and we get to the host, you know, team, and they're like, how did you end up, you know, so how did you move up in the bracket? You guys weren't supposed to be here, you know. And so I thought, you know, we with what we had, we really did well. And you know, it taught me, I mean, we weren't world beaters, but you know, it really made me have a goal to just overachieve with every group that I had. So whether it was a very talented group or whether it was a group that, you know, didn't have much talent, as long as we overachieved, that I could call that season a success. That was just my job, you know.
Yeah. So now 3-4 years. Now you're in Chino Hills. You're an assistant coach. Tell us about how that went and how you transitioned into being a head coach, and let's go from there.
So Chino Hills was a brand new, you know, community. You know, the school was only about 8-9 years old at the time that I, you know, got there, and got to teach health, which was a subject that was much easier than special ed. And, you know, it allowed me to take a quick break, allowed me assist. And then it was refreshing because the community had a lot of young families that loved their sports. So sports became, you know, I've never been a part of a community that prioritized sports. And so we had such a diverse group of that. Our demographics had African American, Asian, Hispanic, you know, white. It was awesome, you know. And so for us, you know, we that was a strength of our school, and so we, you know, had some very successful, you know, runs that the 3 years that I assisted. We made it to the semis of our division, one of the top divisions, one year, and that year we found out the team that we had beat earlier in the season ended up winning the division. So we were one game away from matching up with the team that we beat in the finals. And so having not gotten there, we were like, would we ever get there? Would we ever get to the Honda Center? You know, the Honda Center is where these division championship games, you know, take place. And, you know, we were driving down the 57 freeway, you know, all you SoCal people on this call, you can, you know, as you're going up the 57, you could see the Honda Center on the right-hand side. And my wife was, you know, with me at the time. And I just said, you know, that would be my dream to one day, you know, coach in a game at the Honda Center, and not knowing that it could ever happen, you know. But I just had mentioned that to her. So every time we drive down, she reminds me, hey, remember, you know, dreams really do come true, you know. And that was just kind of our thing, you know. So, and then so after the 3 years, the coach had some challenges, and he asked me to take over. And so, you know, so for the next 6 years, I ended up being the head coach. But within my first 3 years of assisting, he gave me the freedom to run some basketball camps. And that's when I first, I'm sure a lot of you guys on the call, you know, you're wondering, how did you guys get the Ball family? You know, what kind of recruiting strategies did you use to recruit those guys? You know, but it was literally a youth basketball camp that I started. And these 3 brothers come into my camp, and just bright-eyed, bushy-tailed kids that just had the biggest smiles, and they just loved being in the gym. And that was my first introduction to Alonzo, Jello, and Mello. They were in 6th, 5th, and 2nd grade.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's amazing. Again, this is your time, you know, but just for the rest of you guys to understand, like, when Steve and I talk and share these stories, that we have so many like similar paths and incidents, you know, the girl telling you like, hey, we had two different, teachers before you and we're going to push you out. I had the same experience when I was first year teacher in the South Bronx, 3 teachers the year prior. And it touches on something about like, you said like persistence or that desire to stick with it. I always want to poke fun at you and say you were a stubborn, hard-headed guy, that you made up your mind. And then just even this camp story, it's the same thing. When I was at DeMatha for 3 years, again, the piece about, before you become a head coach, you have to pay your dues as an assistant coach. And just the fact that you started this camp, like I remember I left DeMatha and then Markelle Fultz becomes this #1 ranked player in the country, but he had been going to the DeMatha camps, and it's one of those things where I don't even remember him,
Right.
So it just really reminds you that any player that comes across your path, you got to treat them right, and the rest will take care of itself. But
right.
There's just so many commonalities in our journey that
Yep.
Sorry for the rest of you. I want to hog the rest of the questions, but so here we are. You're sliding over. It's the hardest thing to do for a coach, right? To be an assistant, you slide over, you become a head coach. Now all of a sudden you're the one where the buck stops. You have to make all the decisions. So how does that go? How are your first years? And again, you said Lonzo came in 6th grade. So at what point in your head coaching career does he come in and take us along that journey?
Yeah, no, it's a great journey, unbelievable journey. And I love how organic it was. And, it was, my first 2 years of coaching, it was just so pure and so, it was so fun. We had great success and, won league and, it just made it to the playoffs and went a couple rounds in the playoffs. But in the back of my head, I just knew that there was this Lonzo Ball. And so even though we had this, local success, I mean, that we earned a lot of local success. And if you get some success in Southern California basketball, that's a real deal, So, that's it. I mean, we could have, hung up our coaching career and we could have been satisfied, but I just knew there was something special about this kid. And I just knew that in a couple of years, this guy's going to be the point guard for my team. And here he is coming to all of our games and watching, just always watching the whole family, before Lonzo, even stepped foot as a student athlete, he just always was there watching, and supporting our team. And I just knew that there was something different about him. And, all my years of coaching, I just wanted to have a player or players that matched the passion that I had. So if I were to open up the gym at like 6 a.m, who's going to be there? Because I knew the formula to success, was a simple formula, but it was a very difficult formula. And so, I had many kids that would come, for 3 or 4 times, but then there would be an excuse. Sorry, coach, I had something, but this kid literally showed up every morning, and then this kid, the first practice of his high school career in the summer, shows up an hour and a half before practice starts and is shooting off on the side. And so let me build this up a little bit, actually.
Let's go. All right.
So we had some success, some local success, and we were returning another good group of seniors. And we had a very good junior class. And Lonzo's this incoming, freshman. And so everybody's playing basketball, too much now. And so here we are in these fall leagues before the summer starts, before Lonzo graduates 8th grade. And, we have our point guard trying out football for the first time. And we have a couple of our other seniors injured. And so here I am taking a group of young freshmen, sophomores to like some of these varsity fall games. and we're getting our tails kicked. It's not looking good, and it's week by week. Like for me, I was a coach that I could have hid and I could have said, let's take a break. Let's, this is not going to look good. This is not going to be good for our reputation. But I just didn't know better. I just we got to go and get better, Yeah. And so here we are with these guys that, they gave me their heart, and blood, sweat, and tears, but they just weren't varsity material. So we literally lose almost every single game in the fall. And so things aren't looking very good. But the moment Lonzo graduates middle school, he literally comes off the graduation stage and comes to our first practice, and he just shows out. I mean, there's no question that this is his team. I just knew it instantly. And we had a senior point guard that was a Division I point guard.
Right.
And he was smart enough to know that this kid's special and we need him. And so I end up saying, hey, we're playing 2 point guards. So that season was so much fun. The ball movement, the extra passing. I loved Lonzo's freshman year. It was such a good time of coaching, And but we end up getting upset in the playoffs. And then here we are, his sophomore year. Now things just blow up. Like all of a sudden he goes to these, showcase events in the summertime, and I see his name on ESPN. I pull up my phone and Lonzo Ball, this and that on ESPN. And this kid, from like 6'2" ends up growing a couple inches to 6'4", 6'5", and he literally burst onto the scene, his sophomore year, or the summer that's going into a sophomore year. And now the stakes are real. Now we're at on the national, scale. And, I just remember that year, we had some ups and downs, but we were a very talented team. We ended up making it to the championship game in the Honda Center against Modern Day, against Stanley Johnson. This team was 34-0. And here we are, 39 seconds left in the game. We're up 1. And I'm just like, oh my God, we're going to win this game. And some things happen, turnover, foul, and we end up losing the game, And I just remember, Lonzo didn't have the best shooting game. And I remember that was a game that we weren't at our best, but defensively we were, really good at that night. But where do you go from there? You're thinking, are we ever going to get back to this? All these questions come back. Are you ever going to get back to this point? And it was interesting because after the season, we find out that Modern Day is ranked number 1 or 2 in the nation. And we knew that we should have beat them. And then we looked later on, down the ranking. And here we are, Chino Hills, number 15 or 16 in the nation. And I say to myself, this is something that I've never dreamt about. Excuse me. And I remember at that time, let me take it back a little bit. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Maybe I should close the window. All right. Sorry.
Yeah.
But I remember a couple of things that really took place that season. I called Coach Yanai, and I asked him for some advice, obviously, about coaching. Then I tell him about this kid that I thought was really special. And he, long story short, ends up making the trip to Chino Hills and sees him live and starts working with him, on some skills. And then he gets to evaluate him in practice. And then all of a sudden, at the end of practice, he says, yeah, he's a real deal. this kid's really good.
Yeah.
And he goes, next week I'm going to Duke because Coach Yanai, he gets invited by, all these major college, programs. Duke happened to be the one at the time. And he goes, I'm going to Duke next week, and I'm going to tell Mike about this kid. And I'm going to tell Mike to start recruiting him. And I'm like, thanks, Coach. But who's Mike? And I'm thinking in my mind, who's Mike? And then as I'm walking to my car, I'm like, Coach K. This guy's about to talk to Coach K about Lonzo Ball. And who refers to Coach K as Mike, right? Only if you're Coach Yanai. But I was like, okay, this is real.
It's getting
this
real.
Kid, yeah. So those are all these little, lead up stories and, things that transpire to, really just make us believe that we can end up being this national, team. Yeah, national level team. So
now you've set the stage for Lonzo's junior and senior year. Jello's going to start, showing up to the scene. Melo for the senior year. Again, Steve, you and I are brothers. So just as a coach to coach, like, what were you thinking, man? 39 seconds left. You can't tell yourself we're going to win this game. Like, and you naturally transitioned to bring Coach Yanai in. I almost wanted to ask him, like, hey, that's like for you as a growth, right? Like a moment where your mindset as leading them wasn't where it needed to be, right? So
no. It wasn't. Coach Yanai's wisdom was exactly. He shared it with me, and I didn't really follow it as much as I should have. So he told me before the game, Steve, don't worry about the officials. Don't worry about the officials. Focus on, coaching your guys. Focus on, really getting your guys ready, in the moment. Prepare your guys for what's next. And don't pay much attention to the officials. Don't give your energy there. And I didn't do that. I paid too much attention to the officials. And that was, I always look back at that game with that regret. And, but there's Coach Yanai's wisdom for me that only, guys that have gone through, experiences like that. Yeah. And so they can share that with you, and so I was such a young, inexperienced coach at the moment. Coach knew how fiery I was, and he just knew. And so he was so gracious to be like, after the game, he wasn't the type that I told you so, Steve, he just, he was so gracious and, just the best teacher, Yeah.
So now you eat this humble pie a little bit, you reflect, and now you're heading into this junior year. So what happens next?
Yeah, that junior year was a amazing story because, here we are with Jello as a sophomore. We have a great group of returning players, and here we are signing up for all these national tournaments. We're scheduled to play Oak Hill, and throughout this whole process, I'm constantly calling Coach, for advice. And we have so we had multiple Division I players on the team.
That's right.
So the junior that summer of Lonzo's junior year, we were having a youth camp, and we had a kid. Our projected center was a kid named Namdi Okongwu, who's the older brother of Onyeka Okongwu, who is going to be a lottery pick in this year's draft. And Namdi was scheduled to be our center. He had just received an offer from Loyola Marymount, and he was going to summer school the whole time, so we didn't see him for the first part of the summer. And but this Friday, he ends up showing up to my camp. And gosh, it's so difficult to talk about this, but you know, it, you know, he happens to just show up randomly to this Friday to the youth camp to help out. And, you know, since I didn't see him the whole summer, I just had some words of encouragement for him, some congratulations. You know, just, he was so excited about this upcoming season, his senior year, playing with Lonzo finally, and, you know, having his year, you know, and that next day, I believe it was actually the Monday, actually, following that weekend, I get news that Nnamdi was in an accident, a skateboarding accident, that he was in critical condition. And I was out of town, so I couldn't fly back, you know. So that whole week, you know, I was on vacation. It was the worst vacation, you know, like it was constant phone calls of updates, how he was doing, how Nnamdi was doing. He was in critical care for the whole week. And later that week, I find that you know, they have to make the decision, you know, to take him off, you know, life support that he passed. And so that year just started, you know, in the worst imaginable, you know, way possible. And, you know, so that whole season we dedicate to Nnamdi, and we were playing with, so a kid ends up, another kid, a projected starter Division I player, ends up transferring. Another kid ends up being declared ineligible. And so here we are with Lonzo, Jello, a freshman that's never played, a football player that has never played, you know, high school basketball, and then a kid that transferred in playing his first year for us, you know. And we go to the Bass Pros tournament, and we're scheduled to play Oak Hill. And this is a national tournament. Oak Hill has 8-9 Division I players, Dwayne Bacon. And here they are, you know, as soon as we get there, we have our time, allotted time to do a shoot around. And of course, Oak Hill's there doing their thing. And I just go up to, you know, Steve Smith, the legendary coach. And I just say, hey, coach, I don't know. It's just an honor to be here. It's just,
Come on, Steve,
you know,
no.
for me to, you know, just, you know, have an opportunity to play, you know, something's, you know, you're doing something right. Yeah. But I was literally about to call the tournament director and say, hey, you're going to have to reschedule us. Like, this is going to be bad. I'm sorry. But we end up starting the game, and that was a game that I visually saw Lonzo's greatness. We have a team literally that shouldn't be on the court, and Lonzo dominates the entire game. Puts us up 14. Jello's on fire. We're up 14 for the majority of the game. And I'm going into the locker room with a 14-point lead, like, oh my God. You know, like, this is unbelievable, you know. And the fans, there's 10,000 people in that arena.
Yep.
And they're going crazy, you know. They're like, this doesn't happen, you know. And so they're rooting for us now. And so we end up going down to the wire. And, you know, we were, again, one of those games where it was like, we're up 2. The kid that hadn't hit a 3 for them, the whole game ends up hitting a 3. Now they go up 1, and we end up losing the game, right? So, but that game, I was able to look back and say, you know, Lonzo was ranked number 12 by ESPN at the time. And I say to myself, Lonzo, you're actually the number 1 player in the nation in my book, because I just had to realize practically how good this guy was. I was thinking, there's no other player in the nation that I could have replaced him with that would have allowed us to be up 14 points, that dominated the game in all aspects. Like, if we would have switched Dwayne Bacon for Lonzo that game, we would have been down 14, you know. But that just told me how great this kid was. And, having, the expertise of people like Dave Yanai, seeing greatness in him, he just allowed us to put Lonzo in a position that made him feel that, I'm going to impact the game in every aspect. So now as a coach, having coached him, having learned, from Coach Yanai's, wisdom, the way I coach and the way I teach now is we're not just focusing on the offensive aspect that the game is so focused on now. If you wanted to be a successful basketball player, you better learn how to play some defense. You better learn the skill of passing. You better learn the skill of being a great teammate. You better learn all these skills. It's not about shooting and dribbling and, making the highlight tape, And so I just, have been so fortunate to see it and also learn it, from some of the greats. Yeah.
You're touching on the passing, the defense, and the teamwork. Now, again, I'm going to push back a little bit because now you have this, again, an emotional season, losing Namdi, going to the next year. His younger brother Onyeka comes in. He's a freshman. You got Eli Scott. You got the 3 Ball brothers. And I mean, Steve, I don't know how many, again, we're 50 minutes in. We really just, today is, again, every episode or every series is going to be different. But I know we're nerding out a little bit going into the coaching piece of it.
Yeah.
Come on, brother. That team was running good.
The entertaining stories, right?
It is. But in terms of basketball, I just had never seen what you guys were doing. And I know that a lot of the media plays it off as the chemistry of the 3 Ball brothers, but just knowing what you've already shared about just having learned from Coach, being able to lean on Coach Yanai and who's seen everything, you have this team that only plays 5 dudes.
Yeah.
That press the full time, baseball passes, just something we've never seen before to win a national championship. So what was the vision for that? How did that come about as a coach? How did you put the pieces into place?
Right.
Let's nerd out a little bit on
that.
Yeah.
So real quick, that junior year, after dedicating that season to Nandi, it ends up, we end up making it to the state championship. Yeah. And, we beat Corona Centennial, which we thought was the tougher game in the semis. And then we end up, playing up in NorCal against a team that we should have beat. And Lonzo fouls out with 3 minutes. And long story short, we thought that was our, our championship. And we end up losing in double overtime. And so that loss stuck with us that whole for 365 days. That loss stuck with us. Not only did we dedicate that season to, Namdi, who was a close, he was best friends with everybody on the team. It was, we had that hurt. And so that allowed us, looking back, to play with, an urgency, and it allowed us to not take things for granted. And I think it allowed us, really, that was the piece that allowed us to have that unbelievable 35-0, run. But just to paint the picture of that next season, here we are, really excited. We have a loaded team. LaMelo's a freshman. Here's Lonzo's senior year, and we're getting all these invites, and we get one particular invite that stands out. So the city of Palms in Florida is one of the nationally recognized, tournaments in the nation. And the tournament director calls me and says, "Hey, we'd love to have you guys out." And it's not a guarantee that we accept. And so he entices us by saying, you would have a chance to play Montverde, who's been the number 1 team in the nation for the last 3 out of 4 years. And so I said, okay, I'll call you back, So I go to my team, and I know I want to go. you know, because how many times do you get this opportunity? You know, you don't get it. So I just wanted to see where my team's minds were at. I said, hey guys, you know, we have this great opportunity. We all know we're gonna be a great team. So we can kind of just stay local. We have a great opportunity to go undefeated, and we can kind of, you know, have other people make the argument that we're the number one team in the nation.
Yeah.
Or we could go headhunt the giant. You know, we could go. And they all ponder for a couple seconds and let's go, coach, you know. So I said, all right, you know, we're going, you know. And so the buildup was awesome. You know, they end up, USA Today ranks us number 7 before we enter the tournament. There's, you know, just a buildup, a redemptive story to it where Namdi's younger brother, Onyeka's this green freshman who's shouldn't really be, you know, starting, but we have to start him, you know. And I remember preparing for that tournament and we passed the ball to him and he casually lays it up. And I said, oh, you don't even understand the level of competition that you're going to see next week. Guys are going to have elbows above the rim dunking this ball. And if you lay this ball up, it's going to end up in the stands, you know? And so these are little things that we're having to literally coach on the fly and prepare. You know, we have literally 2 guys with varsity experience.
Yeah.
Lonzo, Jello. Eli's first year of playing varsity basketball. Melo's first year of playing varsity basketball. Onyeka's first year of playing varsity basketball. Melo's 13 years old, by the way, if you guys don't know. He should be in 8th grade. He's 5'10", 120 pounds, should be in 8th grade. The family skipped the grade so they can all 3 brothers can play 1 year of high school basketball together. So this guy's in 8th grade. And so all these people are, oh yeah, coach, you know, you should go undefeated. Look at the team that you have. Yeah, I understand. But back then these kids were, you know, not projected, you know, lotto picks. They ended up being that way, you know. So anyways, we end up going, we win. They match us up with Thomas Jefferson in New York. And we end up almost losing that game. Yeah. You know, we end up having to pull this out last second. And so the next game is the matchup with Montverde. And this game, you know, and I'll tell you, you know, this was one of those stories that you have to write a book about. And so here I am, like, trying to get these guys to really just have the right frame of mind approaching this game. And I'm just so humble. Like, at that point, I'm just like, okay, here I am, an immigrant son, you know, a Korean immigrant son, you know, and what am I doing here, you know? And I say to him, and I'm thinking about my team, and I'm like, we're this little known team that nobody knows of, Chino Hills. Like, who's heard of Chino Hills, a little public school in the Inland Empire. And we have a bunch of neighborhood kids. And I just say to myself, that's why we're meant to be here. There's a story that's bigger than ourselves, you know, that has to be told. And we're part of that bigger story. And that's why we're supposed to be here. And I'm fired up in the locker room. I tell these kids you know, this story, you know, who the heck are we? You know, we are supposed to be here. You know, I'm firing these kids up, you know, and right before, you know, they get announced, the announcer says, David versus Goliath. They're building this game up. Montverde, number 1 in the nation, against number 2 in the nation, Chino Hills. I said, number 2? When did they rank us number 2? Like, we were number 7 right before the tournament, you know. And so here we are, this literal David versus Goliath game. And I'm fired up, you know. I'm yelling at our guys, you know, we're not spectators. We've come here to play, you know. And I'm yelling, and I give my guys one last huddle. I said, let's go, you know, yelling. And then little LaMelo turns around, looks at me and smiles and says, I love coach. And he just starts shaking his head and he just starts jogging off to center court. And I'm like, in that moment, I'm looking at this kid like, this kid has zero nervousness. There's no nerves in his body. All right, let's go. We're good. And this kid ends up running circles around, this team. And we end up winning this game. That was literally David versus
circles. Yeah.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
Daniel, do you have the clip? Yeah.
I mean, Steve, I've just had never seen anything like it. I've had some interactions with Coach Boyle. I've gotten to know, see him and be around him for USA basketball a couple of times. But I mean, you got a 13-year-old, 120-pound freshman guard just literally running circles until he's just throwing up an alley-oop or a three-pointer or a layup. I mean, what are you thinking? So I love that story again. Just, I've heard Steve tell that story, but again, I know what it's like it's a big game and you realize that this kid is just on another, just plane of thought.
Yeah.
So you're watching this happen. So what's happening? What's going, again, are you saying to yourself, we got a chance to win this, we got 39 seconds left, or?
Well, we're up 14. Yeah. We're up 14
Yeah.
the majority of the game. And I'm like, and Montbert's the hometown team.
Yeah.
But you have the whole gym rooting for us, and so we're up big. It wasn't just we're in this game, we're up huge, like we're dominating. And then, our weakness was, we tire out and we don't maintain and sustain, our lead very well, against really good teams. So we let them catch up. And now we're only up, what was it, 1 or 2 at the time towards the end of the game. And we end up having to pull this game out, And so here we are. This is the one time we really celebrated that year, except for the last game of the season. We're running around, we run into the locker room and we're just like, what just happened? We're number 1 in the nation. And so in my mind, we want to feel proud and celebrate. But in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, we're number 1 in the nation, but it's literally 3 weeks into the basketball season. And so my challenge to the guys were, that's great. We can be number 1, but we have 2 more games in this stupid tournament. Why can't we just go home right now? Right. And so we literally have to have this mindset of one game at a time, one day at a time. You can't look too far ahead, because if you do look too far ahead, it's overwhelming, and it was a matter of just really just trying to maintain these kids' minds, and their mindsets, and trying to be the best every game. Because if we would have lost one game and we finished 34-1, that season would have been considered a failure. We would not be able to, sit with that one loss, with that one loss. So it was just a process of, having to just get these guys to really focus one day, one game at a time. And it took, me, I remember my phone. So we had our last tournament in that year. It was in Palm Springs. It was the Max Preps national tournament. And I have an 1.5-hour drive to Palm Springs, and I call Coach Yanai, and I'm like, he's congratulating us. And I'm just like, asking for wisdom again. And he says, that Lonzo is the best defensive player in the nation. And I thought, that's interesting, because everybody thinks about his passing. And he says, you got to get Lonzo to believe that he's the best defensive player in the nation. Look how he impacts the game so much. And so I go to Lonzo, you're the best defensive player in the nation. and he's like, stops and looks at me like, and that was the first time he's ever heard that comment.
Hmm.
And I say, look how, and I literally, repeat what Yanai says and said, look how you impact the game. Look at all the steals. Look at all the shot blocks. Look at your timing. Look at your instincts, and he believes, Yanai told me, you have to make Lonzo believe that he's the best defensive player. And look at him now. He's one of the NBA's best defensive point guards. And so for Coach Yanai to see that in this kid, nobody else in the world saw it. It was Yanai. And so those are life-altering, moments. And those are life-altering, things that coaches can say to players and people that is literally transforming. And so I'll remember that for the rest of my life, and I got to give credit where credit's due. And, that, just to have that spoken, at that time was exactly what we needed and exactly what Lonzo needed to hear. And here he is going on a defensive tear. I mean, he was just a monster, And so if we don't have Lonzo doing that, we don't win every single game, so.
I can't even tell you guys how awesome this is. Just, again, no one, for those of you guys who know that how humble Steve is, and he's quick to take, turn credit away, but for us to find out to the depth of how much Coach and I, held your hand through it a little bit even.
Yeah, absolutely.
Coach and I, can we unmute you for a second? I just, I know that Steve wanted to really just run off your resume and all that for the people who may not know, but I think that Coach K, calling him by first name basis, I think just kind of sets the tone. But for you, Coach, I mean, you coached against him when he was a punk, college kid at Westmont, and then you see a decade and change later, he's winning the national high school championship. Like, what was that like for you? What was that, what are some things that you saw that championship year that you saw Steve mature into to this national, coach of the year?
Well, probably the first thing that comes to mind is from humble beginnings. And Steve alluded to that with his story about his life coming from Korea. But yes, first time watching or actually playing against Steve with my team. He was a marvelous guard at Westmont. And I'll tell you this, there was not a guy that played harder or with any more fierceness. There was a toughness about him that every coach envies and would like all those players to have. And so to me, coming full circle to the Chino Hills story, I think that it was always there. And Steve was able to, not every coach can do this, was transfer how he played the game, how he viewed the game, and be able to transfer to his players. And he's very humble, but I will say this, with the different kids that were so talented, but a lot of coaches have talent, but it takes a real acumen and a sharpness to understand how to fit the pieces together, how to be able to use his thinking to devise a game plan for offense and a game plan for defense that takes advantage for those kids and their talents. And so Steve was able to do that, to go undefeated. But, I think credit has to be given to Steve for implementing that full court press, to be able to, am I there?
No, you're here, Coach.
Okay.
Yep.
To implement the strategy. And that's not easy to do. But, at the outset of any season, you truly try and find what your team is and who the players are. And that's something that is very important. And then you structure the kind of offense and defense that you need to use to best take advantage of their talents. And I think Steve did a marvelous job of doing that. And the story about Alonzo's defense, and I really did believe that he was that kind of player defensively. He impacts the game on both sides of the ball. And I think that when Steve talked to him about this, that's the real piece of coaching, to get him to buy in, because now everybody on the team is playing as hard as he is on the defensive end of the floor. And they turn teams over from the defensive end, and they got a lot of easy buckets. And you need to get easy buckets against the kind of opponents that you play against. But again, I think it gave them a real confidence and took them over the hump, and that they could beat anybody in front of them. And so it's, again, a real piece of coaching on Steve's part to recognize these things. And getting back my thoughts on that game where he really got on the referees in that one game, that he took that loss at the end. But that's the fieriness in Steve. So you never want to take that away from a coach or from his players. It's just a matter of learning to channel it and be smart about it. And one thing I'll say is I always try and tell coaches, eliminate distractions. And part of you getting on a referee can be a distraction to you. You could lose 2 or 3 plays while you're harping on the referees. And it's so important that, and the kids need you to be able to, instruct them as to what you need to do to keep in mind the strategies in front of them. So the focus is always on the players. And, good coaches, once again, understand that. And none of us could win without those wonderful kids that we have. And just directing these kids in that fashion during that magical year is really special. But I'll tell Steve this, I enjoyed his other teams. Every one of those kids, it's not the championships, it's the championship quality of the kids you had. And Steve mentioned and talked about with some heartstrings pulling on him about Nambi. And I remember that 6'7" kid in practice, and I saw the talent there in such a wonderful disposition. And he brought that to the floor, that young kid, and he was sorely missed. And I know what Steve speaks of, but it takes a coach to bring these guys together and be that team. And I say underline team because it takes teamwork. You can have all the talent in the world, but they're going in their separate ways and playing for themselves. You're not going to win championships. It's about being able to get them together as a team. And again, credit Steve for bringing those guys together, understanding the mindset that they had to have to come together to truly be the best they could be. And that's what you're after as a coach, that elusive, can you get this team to be the best that they could be? Many coaches fall short, but the effort and the journey that Steve went through, pretty magical. And I would always say to my players, each season, and this is pure Mike Krzyzewski, each season is a lifetime and special unto themselves. And so enjoy each one of them, because the journey, as you can imagine myself, I've been retired for 15 years now, but the journey goes by much too quickly. So enjoy each moment, and the championships aside, it's the journey, Steve, and to yourself, Marshall. So don't forget to enjoy the journey and the process of each day in practice, being with those wonderful kids, because that's the real joy as a teacher and a coach. The players are the most special thing that you have. They're the championships.
Coach, thank you so much. And we're 70 minutes in, Steve. You've told some great stories. The beauty of the Zoom piece is that, again, we Daniel and I made a conscious decision to do it this way so that we would bring you in front of these people and give access to you. But so So I want to turn it over to just anybody who has questions, but just, there's whole another chapter in your life where you went on to take over for Coach Katani, who is Coach Yanai's nephew. Is that correct? Who
Yes.
in his own right, 35 years, Hall of Fame coach in California, and all that. But for us, Coach and I, to see to see you validate what Steve has done, no amount of national championship. I know, right, Steve? Like all these worldly accolades that you can get can't measure up to what we all got to watch Steve get from Coach and I. So that was touching to me. I really want to thank you for that. And what you've done for Steve. Steve's turned around and done for me this year. We went down to Westchester. We were 4-7, really struggling. And I actually had Steve come and speak to my team after the game. And the belief that he was able to inject into Lonzo, Steve, like, that's who you are today. You turn around and you inject that into whatever space you walk into. And we turned around and we ran the table in league. So that's, Steve being a coach of coach to a peer. So again, Coach, that's your legacy. Our league championship this year, Coach and I want to trace it back to you, give you proper credit. But that's what this is about. And we want to turn around and, there's people in here who may not be in basketball, in whatever profession that you're in. I hope that this type of mentorship, this kind of giving back to the next generation, is something that we're able to encourage through this time. So thank you so much. Daniel, if you want to just, maybe facilitate just a little bit of Q&A time, and we can call it a day.
Yeah. So we'll enter Q&A time. It's going to look a little different than what we had last week or last time. Instead of messaging me the questions, you guys can just unmute yourselves and ask away, whether it's to Coach and I or Coach Steve Baik. The floor is yours.
Hey, Steve, thanks for sharing your story. I appreciate it tremendously. I'm not actually in basketball, but definitely in youth leadership, mentorship. Coach, I appreciate your being on this call too. Just you can see the mentoring that you did for Steve and how much of a difference it makes. My question was just, Steve, how hard was it for you getting over the hump? You shared stories of losing that close game by 1 and then another close game and then just challenges, and kind of what kept you going to finish out, that magical season for your team?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question in that, it's the journey isn't really highlighted as much as that, like the end result. So, looking back, I mean, the key pieces to that journey was, being your best day to day, really just not getting overwhelmed by the big, goal at the end of the road, but just really focusing on the day to day. And there were several moments that later on in the season, there's little stories in itself that really concerned, the outcome of that year and how it was going to go. So second half of league season, I'm sorry, the first half of league season, Lonzo ends up breaking his finger. He has a dislocation on his middle finger of his shooting hand. And I'm thinking to myself, potentially there goes the season. And obviously people, we don't hear about stuff like that. And we don't want to put that out to the media at all, because, that's just something that we don't need our opponents, knowing. And so Lonzo literally plays a month left-handed and, doesn't really shoot. And, we end up staying undefeated in that whole process. But after that, that was a big challenge that we had to, get over. And then, just the length of every season is going to be, you're going to find some grueling times, and you're always having, as a coach and as a leader, to just get your guys to refocus, see the keep, you know, your eyes on the prize, you know, so to speak. But again, the way you do that is day to day, you know, get the most out of each day, you know, prepare, you know, in the day to days. And then the key for us was this, for me, you know, the reason why I choose humility and being humble is because, whatever accomplishments that we've had at that point as a team and for myself personally was not the ultimate, you know, that we had a mindset, that special group had a mindset that we weren't going to really, you know, job's not done until we go 35-0. And so we took on that, that term humility. But that term humility actually meant hunger. So there's hunger for more. And so instead of, you know, celebrating, and right now we're just so quick to celebrate these little things here and there, we just had a deeper understanding of who we were, what we were capable of, and the real prize that we were, you know, shooting for. And so, you know, just to, you know, again, to keep that focus, and then, you know, just for us to have that humility. And when I had Lonzo being interviewed, and he mentioned that they need to stay humble. Like, I didn't tell him to say that, but this was like the locker room talk. And for him to say that in an interview, I was like, okay, we're good. We have McDonald's All-American National Player of the Year saying that we need to be humble and choose humility. You know, there's nothing else you need to hear as a coach, you know, from the nation's best player, you know. And so again, that just told me that this kid's hungry, you know, there's job's not done yet. Yeah.
I have a question. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Coach Yanai, for sharing your piece. Daniel, Marshall, for setting up this initiative. So I see a lot of parallels with kind of how you came up, Steve, just with myself as well. I'm originally from Vancouver, born in Korea, moved to San Diego about 9 months ago to pursue my career. But as an aspiring sports agent and being in a space where it's filled with, well, not many minorities, how did you kind of block out the noise?
You know, it was interesting because early in my career, you know, I took a lot of heat, you know, from different people, you know, just the critics out there. And I never really positioned myself to deflect, you know, some of the criticism. I was just so focused on just my job. And, but I realized at some point that I needed to do you know, I needed to get to a place where, you know, I needed to make sure that those criticism would not affect my team. So anyways, what I want to say, you know, is, to answer your question, is that, you know, you just need to be so locked in, to your goals, to your craft, and really choose excellence. Because, you know, Coach and I, you know, I don't like saying that he was one of the greatest Asian American coaches, because that's not the truth. It is the truth, but it's not the full truth. Coach Yanai is one of the greatest coaches, regardless of ethnicities and levels, and he's one of the greatest basketball coaches that we've had in our time. And so for us, we need to really just use that the criticisms and the discriminations and the, you know, the stereotypes as fuel to the fire. That's not everybody gets the, you know, they don't get that opportunity. But, you know, for us, I think the first thing is recognizing who you are, like recognizing, you know, your gifts and talents, and recognize you got to have a strong sense of identity. And when you know, solidify that, and you really, you know, get to where you feel proud of your craft and your work, you know, that's when things will really just start. I feel like you're going to achieve the success and you achieve the things that you've sought out for.
Thank you. And I just want to pass that question to Coach Yanai as well. Obviously, probably like within your generation, it probably was a lot worse than it is now. And, how are you able to come up as a pioneer in this space where minority isn't as representative?
Well, when Steve was just talking about these critics, it reminded me of Theodore Roosevelt's really fine statement that he made in regards to that. And he said that it's not the critic who counts, it's the man who is actually in the arena. And the second thing that came to my mind was you have to be true to yourself. And every morning you get up and see that person in the mirror, you have to be true to that person you see in the mirror. And if you're good with that, then you're, I think, a big step in the right direction. All the naysayers and the critics, they tell you about what you can't do. They don't count, really. It's the man who's in the arena, and that's you. And so that's something that's important, I think, moving forward for all of us to remember as young coaches moving forward. And I've always tried to embrace that thought. And, as a minority coach, you have to overcome perhaps a little bit more than the majority community. But, you can't let that be a roadblock to your aspiring to be successful. And Coach Wooden said, success is being the best you can be. And that means each and every day. And you teach that to your players. And all of a sudden they forget about the championship or the big game. They just, embrace the process each day. That's the fun of coaching. Every day is a gift to us. And when you get caught up in the journey and that chase of getting these kids better, the wins and the championships, the undefeated season that Steve went through, which is so uncommon, but things like that happen. But that's an aside. That end goal is really a side thing. It's the journey with those young people that you have. That's the most important thing to focus on.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey, Coach. Terry speaking right here. I just had a quick question for any aspiring coaches, people who might want to be coaches. You talk about the day-to-day preparation that you need to do. I'm just wondering, what are some of the practical day-to-day stuff that you do? Is it watching film? Is it interacting in your practices? What are those day-to-day practical advice that you might give for aspiring coaches? And any of the coaches can respond, but yeah.
Let's see. Was that a question addressed to me or Coach?
Honestly, to any of the coaches.
Okay.
If they had any input.
I'll start. So for me, it's just always recognizing, what the strengths and the weaknesses, and you're on a constant pursuit of planning ahead and foreseeing what things can hurt you in the future. And so if you don't have that forward that future type of preparation and planning ahead, then something that you're not planned for or prepared for can cost you, and so you're always making clear the things that you need to get better at, what the players need to get better at. And so yeah, it could be watching film, it could be in practice, but there's constant communication of the things that you're doing well and the things that you're not doing well, and obviously reasons why you're trying to improve certain things that you're not so good at. Because now I find that we're in a society where you know, we focus so much on the things that we're good at, and we neglect to, you know, ever even bring up the things we're not good at. And so the thing that, for me as a player, that I've been able to kind of, you know, transfer over to the teams in my coaching have been, I've never wanted to be exposed and have any of my weaknesses be exposed. It was literally like a fear of mine. And so I just worked relentlessly to have no weaknesses. And so those are things that, as a coach, I think if you want to be successful, you got to have that type of preparation.
Thanks so much, Coach.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like me to make a few comments?
That'd be great.
I'd
Coach.
love to hear it.
Yeah.
Well, I think as young coaches, and when I used to teach and lecture at some of the, you know, basketball theories classes and fundamentals classes in our sport, I would say to them that number one thing that you have to keep in mind is that you have to really care for your players as human beings. If you have that trait, then you have a chance to continue. If you don't have that in your core and in your heart, I think you're probably in the wrong business. So that was the number one thing. And then from my mentors, Pete Newell and John Wooden, those two were really, really great teachers of the game. So I think the capacity and ability to master teaching of the fundamental skills in the game, I think that is so important. And you know, if you really care about your kids, you will pursue the best ways and best methods to teach these wonderful fundamentals to the kids. And then thirdly, I think that you have to really be good at preparing practices. And you know, the old saying that failure to prepare is preparing to fail. And that's straight out of John Wooden. So I think that's important. And then more than anything else, get them to understand that it's a team game. And one of the traits that you need them to have is learn how to be an unselfish human being and trying to get others better with your work. And that's something that players need to embrace. And that's one of the reasons why I always started on the defensive end of the floor in my teaching, because that's the one way that you really get them to bind themselves in terms of effort. If you have four guys working in one knot, the defense will not work, no matter what system you run. It has to be five guys as a unit. They have to be a team. And when they work so hard on defense, it's a little bit easier to transfer them into the offensive end of the floor and share the ball. When they work so hard as a unit, they come down the floor, they're trying to get the best shot for their team. And that's something that is a team affair. They have to play for each other, screening for each other, making passes to you, all those great things. And Lonzo Ball, I think, by example, shows us how important that aspect of the game is. He was a marvelous passer that shows how important that skill itself impacts the team, because it's the most unselfish act in the game, because you're giving the ball up, you're finding others. And I think about the NBA championships that we all viewed, and you see how Butler, that's one of the things that I marveled at, how good he was at finding others. And we have always known how good he is as a single attack person offensively. But he was a team guy, and he made all those guys around him better. And that's why they were able to get to the finals and push the Lakers around a little bit. So that's so important. And through your practice regimen, and I believe this, some people say you can't teach toughness. I beg to differ, because I think that through your practice regimen, the things that you would set up, especially tough-minded defensive drills and tough-minded rebounding drills, you bring out the toughness by your drills, and you encourage the ones that are a little bit weaker to each day get a little bit better. But it takes a coach to really teach these things. But toughness is something that has to be a part of any championship team. So I think that those would be the things that I would really focus on and being good at to move forward in this great profession of ours of coaching basketball.
Thanks for sharing, Coach.
It was my pleasure.
Awesome, awesome. Does anyone have one last question, or we're gonna wrap this up here?
Yeah, but,
Hi.
go ahead.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Suchong from Malaysia.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to thank Coach Steve and Coach Yanai for sharing their experiences. Shout out to Coach Marshall and Kelvin from Snow Valley. And the question is, does anyone have any experience in introducing basketball to communities which don't have, who has limited access or no knowledge of basketball around the world, or because it's quite common in the States, but around the world where there's limited access or no knowledge of basketball, what would you emphasize on teaching the children or the communities to make it fun for them and to make them keep trying to learn the game of basketball?
Thanks for that, Suchong. Just for people, Suchong's an old friend of ours. He is calling in from Malaysia, correct? Right now, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
So that he has a program out there. He's doing a great job. But yeah, I'll leave it up to Coach and I or Steve if you guys have some thoughts on that.
Well, this is Coach Yanai.
Yeah.
And I would take that word that you use right there, how to make it fun for these young people. And, you know, when you have, use your imagination and to have fun drills, they'll embrace the game a lot more readily. And, you know, make it fun learning fundamentals. After all, it is a game. And I think that if you make it fun to experience basketball, that you have a lot better chance of creating the interest to have them form teams and leagues, and even just informal basketball, if it's 3-on-3. It's such a fun game. And so I would really emphasize making it fun, making it an activity that one and all can enjoy, you know, because the adults can get right in there and teach those young ones. But I've always felt like in teaching our basketball camps at Cal State Dominguez and Cal State LA that we had all those youngsters from, you know, the 4th, 5th grade on up to high school kids. And, you know, I thank God I had such good assistants that worked in the camp, and they put their heads together and they used their imagination and got all kinds of fun drills to teach this great game of basketball to them. And before they know it, the 2.5-hour day of basketball goes by very quickly. And that's when you know you've probably had a pretty good practice regimen for them.
Thank you, Coach Yanai.
Well, good luck with that, you know, because it's a fun enterprise. And if you just keep that uppermost in your mind, just really enjoy it, because it's such a wonderful game. Again, you know, it's a family affair in my mind, you know, and these teams are families. And I would use that as a kind of a trigger or a way to, you know, get them into the fold of basketball.
Okay, I'll keep note of that. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Awesome, awesome. Well, we're going to end it with one last question from Jason Jung. So go ahead.
Oh, is that me?
Oh, no, Jason Jung over there. He had one more question.
Am I on? Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me? Okay, good. So my question was, I guess, along with just the general basketball. So I work as a skills trainer in Korea, and I also worked as a trainer back in the US as well. And one of the struggles that I always faced was balancing between the fundamentals of the game and the actual skills, if you will, that skills trainers are expected to coach in terms of the various movements. Most of the times it'll be dribbles, especially nowadays. Kyrie and Stephen Curry are very, very famous for. So I guess as coaches in general, how would you balance between those two? But at the same time, I guess what would you lean towards more in terms of those two skill sets, if you will?
Well, if you're working, this is Coach Yanai, if you're working from an offensive skills standpoint, obviously the handling of the basketball is paramount. You got to be able to get where you need to get with the skill of dribbling, and that's important. I think Lonzo Ball is a great example of how important the passing skill is. This day and age, it seems like that is kind of a neglected skill. And so we need to emphasize that, and I would emphasize that in your skill development. Involve more than one player, and involve those players utilizing the pass, all the assortment of passes that are needed in a game situation. And then I would think, and this is another neglected area, Coach, and that is the off-ball skills. There are so many things that the players need to understand that there's only one guy with the ball, four have to play without the ball. And so being able to move without the basketball, and obviously helping teammates get free, which involves the screen or the movement of the ball to get better angles to make passes, that's where you're getting them to really understand how important these skills are to a team game. The individual skills with the ball and the shooting and the passing, those things obviously are a little bit more clear to coaches teaching. But it's these other areas that deal with off-ball skills that are so important to weave into really how to play this game. And again, I use the example of the NBA championships. You see those different systems of play, but you see so much good cutting and screening, and the most important team fundamental on offense is spacing and putting players where they can best help the team. But these are concepts. I think that when you go and work out these young players, that they need to be made aware of how these skills are woven into the team fabric. And then I think you're really addressing and getting a much more smarter player that is going to be skilled. It's not enough to be able to pound a basketball. It's, how do you use that dribble? Is it just for yourself to get to the rim? No, it's not. It's to draw traffic and be able to find others, that you would draw another extra defender, and that understanding of putting the pass. And I'm a little stickler for the emphasis on passing. That's why I love Lonzo Ball so much. And I told him way back, I think it was when he was a sophomore or junior, when Steve had me out, that I said, it's not enough to put the pass in the general vicinity of the player you're passing to. I said, you have to put the ball exactly into the shooting pocket. That is a pass. The others are not a pass, where a guy has to bend down and catch the ball off his shoe tops and that type of thing. I put the ball accurately exactly where that player needs it to make his skill of shooting or driving or passing himself. So there's passing and there's really passing. And sometimes coaches pay a very passive attention to this. But I would say that emphasizing the importance of the pass to these players as you teach them the marvelous ball handling skills and obviously the different shots that they need. But passing, again, I've always felt like it was a very neglected skill, especially in this day of AAU basketball and travel ball, where it seems so much the every man for himself, and shooting the passes after he drives and he exhausts all opportunities for himself, and then he's trying to extract himself out of the jam by making a pass. That's not a pass. That's not a skill that is well done when it's in that kind of context. So as you work with these, I figure that you're working with individual players and maybe groups of 2 and 3 or 4.
Yes.
So I would emphasize if you can have at least 4 guys that you work with together, obviously the single skills that you would work on with them. If you have, at least 2, 3 is better, 4 is even better, to really practice these off-ball skills and understanding spacing and how that's so important. Putting yourself in the right position on the floor. And I was really marveled at Coach Baik's concept of offense, where he created space and he had the ultimate trigger man in Lonzo. And he found those guys that, would be able to be effective in their respective areas. So, it's a little bit more of the intellectual part of the game, but I think that you would be remiss if you didn't address those things in your teaching of these individual skills.
Thank you, Coach.
Welcome.
All right, sweet. Well, we've went over a little bit over the time, but truly humbled and blessed to have Coach Steve Baik and Coach Yanai just impart wisdom and just to be able to learn from their journey. So we're going to wrap this up. What we like to do with all of our guests is one last quick question is we're going to ask what your favorite kimchi is. So we'll start with Coach Steve Baik, man.
Gotta be, man, there's multiple, but the gakdugi stands out right now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay. And then Coach Yanai, do you have a favorite kimchi?
Well, I like them all really, but I'm going to agree with my good friend, Coach Baik. And if he recommends that particular brand, that would be the way to go.
Awesome. Hey, well, we appreciate everyone for sticking around. We're going to have this recording up on YouTube tomorrow at some point, but appreciate y'all. If you guys want to follow us on IG and on Twitter, the Kimchi family, we'll have many more guests to come. So thank you for all the support and have a good night. See you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.